this is Lauren Hollows for NOI Education Services, and today I am coming to you from my caravan. What we are going to be doing for the next couple of weeks is we are going to be going through the CRICOS, the National Code, and just giving an overview of some of the differences and some of the additional things that we need to do as RTOs when we're working with international students. For those of you that would have watched and those of you that work in the CRICOS sector, you would be aware that it is a more highly regulated sector. There are a lot of additional risks, and certainly ASQA, our regulator, takes the CRICOS sector very, very seriously because of some of the risks that have been presented for them in the past. So with our first video today, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the history of CRICOS, the evolution that it's been through over the last kind of 10, 15 years, and why the regulator takes it so seriously. So the international sector has been a hotspot for a long time. As far back as 2009, the government actually went to the extent of turning around and saying every single international RTO will go through a complete re-registration process because of the issues that were happening in the sector at the time. So some of the historical issues that go into the international sector are things like students being rorted financially, students being told that they didn't need to attend classes, students being told that they didn't need to submit assessments, massive scams in relationship to plagiarism of assessments, purchasing of assessments. Some of that, still continues on today. There have been issues in the international sector with student housing. There have been issues with, unfortunately, husbands and wives being brought over, and one of those parties being forced to study in school and then falls pregnant, and then there's been a range of cultural issues that have then affected that. There's been safety issues that have occurred in the international space, with a lot of students feeling unsafe. Even just recently, in the last couple of months, it is only now that China has actually opened back up again and kind of said, it's safe to come to Australia and things like that. So there is just a huge amount of issues that have occurred within this sector, primarily because, you have the compounded issue of supporting students, but often supporting students who are coming over here. They're living by themselves for the first time. They're in a very unfamiliar system. They have to, change culturally and adapt culturally, to a whole different set of norms and things like that. And quite oftentimes that's been without really a sufficient support structure in and around them. So certainly there's often not really a familial, like a family and friends support structure. And so the way that the standards have been written over time to really basically ensure that a lot of those things are now coming under the RTO, or the higher education, or the education provider side of things. So that's why we've got a separate set of standards. Now, one of the other things that you should be aware of if you're working in the CRICOS sector is the CRICOS sector goes from early education through vet, through into higher education, and we've got that same set of national standards, regardless of kind of that age group that's going through. And as I said, it goes from the standard K through 12 through AQF 1 through 10. So there are a lot of students that will sit in this system for a very, very long time. You've got students that may come over and study for, upwards of 10 years within the Australian education system. The CRICOS sector, the international education system as a whole, is a huge part of the Australian economy, contributing over $1 billion a year. And so that is yet another reason why the regulator wants to be protective, because it is very much about protecting Australia's reputation internationally. Australia has had a very, very strong reputation internationally within the CRICOS sector, within international education, as a great exporter of education, people coming over here and learning a range of specialist skills and having those skills exported to other countries. So that's kind of all of the reasons that filter into why we tend to be a lot more protective, and why the regulator does have to go to these additional steps. So we've got our general level of RTO legislation that we have to hit to, and what this series is really going to explore is we're going to look at in each of those areas, be kind of marketing, enrollment, student support, assessment, things like that, the additional layers that we need to consider when we're working with international RTOs, and some of the policies and procedures that we should be considering, and how as an RTO you go about running those sort of things out. I'm going to try and keep each of these to kind of 5 to 6 minutes, not overwhelm you guys with a huge amount of information, and then we will pop all of that into a playlist. If you kind of want to run through the whole thing, but the idea of this series is basically to help support you guys in building your knowledge of what is CRICOS, how to run an effective CRICOS college, and what are some of the considerations and some of the additional things that we should be doing when we're working with international students. So the last thing that we're going to cover today is obviously the actual instruments that you will need to be looking at. Oh, I do apologize. I'm not going to be able to edit that out either. So the last thing that I want to cover today is really just to introduce the legislative instrument, and that is the National Code. Last time it was updated was 2018, so it's been around for quite a few years now. And then the best thing to do is that you just basically go in, Google National Code, and then we've got a series of fact sheets. So similar to how we have the RTO standards that go from kind of 1 to 8, we've got the National Code, which goes from kind of 1 to 11. And it generally sits in the same sort of areas. It's got a couple of those additional requirements. It does go into more detail in relationship to student support, student orientation. It does have a very specific section for the management of younger overseas students. Now, that may or may not come into play depending on the space that your CRICOS RTO operates in. There are some CRICOS RTOs that will kind of maybe work with that kind of 16 to 18-year-old space. It was predominantly set up, obviously, because we have CRICOS in our general K through 12 school system as well. And then we've got a special section for how we manage our agents. And so agents is a very integrated part of this sector. They often play a huge role in relationship to the marketing and recruitment of students and laying those initial foundations. And they will often help support the students through the visa processes and working with the Department of Homeland Affairs to actually bring them onto shore. So how RTOs interact with them and how we ensure that the agents that we are working with as an international RTO are operating to our standards, how we're monitoring them, similar to, the third party space. They cross over that area, and we need to make sure that we monitor them and that we are doing that very, very carefully. So things that go into our written agreements and our monitoring processes, and making sure that they are doing the right thing as well is all very, very important. So that's a little bit about what we're going to be covering in this series. We will be kicking off in a couple of days with information about looking at how we go about marketing to international students and some of the additional considerations that we need to have when we start to look at our marketing for international students. I hope you guys found this helpful. My name is Lauren Hollows. As always, we've got videos dropping every Wednesday and Sunday. If you do want to support us, push the like, the subscribe, all of those good things. Drop a comment if you've got any questions that you want us to cover. Thank you very much for your time. Have a great day. Get outside, eat good food, and spend some time with family. See ya.